In 1891, Charles Augustus Briggs, the newly minted professor of biblical theology at Union Theological Seminary, immediately courted controversy with his opening address entitled "The Authority of Holy Scripture." In his address, Briggs openly brought forth the German Academy idea of higher criticism, the idea that in the academic world, Bible study should consist of the historical origins, the dates, and the authorship of the various books of the Bible. Some of these modernists went even further and started to challenge what they saw as supernatural writings and stories of the Bible. He also went on to explain away that they were simply myths added to Scripture and not real. Others disputed who had authored the books, claiming Moses did not write the opening of the Bible, and disputed the authorship of many other books written therein. Some of the academics and future clergy even doubted the virgin birth of Christ, while others went to the extreme position that Christ was simply a good man. The only thing many of these modernists or higher critics were willing to accept was that the Bible did still contain revelations from God. The address was highly revered by those with modernist leanings and under the guise of academic freedom, while the fundamentalists were mortified at the claims he asserted. Over the next 20 years, the fundamentalists did little to curb the ever-creeping influence of the modernist movement within the church, thus allowing the modernists to gain influence slowly. Over time, in several General Assemblies, the church started to display uneasiness over the licensure and ordination practices of the Presbytery of New York and the orthodoxy of Union Theological Seminary in New York. There were more and more modernist influences coming out of these institutions. In the past, the fundamentalists tried to form more rigid systems in theology, but they failed to do so because instead of instituting formal ecclesiastical procedures, they opted for broad declarations. Finally, the fundamentalists were willing to push a more specific protection of the faith. They compelled the General Assembly to adopt the Doctrine and Deliverance of 1910, or more commonly referred to as the Five Fundamentals. In order for candidates to be ordained, they had to agree to these five fundamentals. They consisted, in the simplest terms, of the inerrancy of the Bible, the virgin birth of Christ, Christ's substitutionary atonement, Christ's bodily resurrection, and the authenticity of Christ's miracle. Militant conservatives or exclusivists at this point sought to create and maintain a narrowly defined version of Presbyterianism. The five fundamentals were to be a firewall against the modernists. Yet the modernists did not go away. Instead, they continued to argue that the faith needed to be brought into a more modern and contemporary context. Even more so, the modernists challenged the authority of the General Assembly to make theological changes. In fact, in the newspaper, The Presbyterian of the South, on April 2, 1919, David Kennedy was disappointed that the Union Seminary was not only ignoring the teachings of the five fundamentals, but were still using the modernist approach of higher criticism and sending new ministers out into the world. He feared that there now seemed to be no way to stop their growing influence, which he was proven correct. The modernist ministry gained greater power in the church through educating the new clergy and also by unification of other liberal branches of Presbyterian sects. Soon they had the voice of the assembly. With support, the modernists presented the Auburn Affirmation of 1924. The Auburn Affirmation represented a striking contrast to the statements of militant conservatives. Whereas the exclusive group demanded theological uniformity, the inclusivists demanded an avocation of liberty and diversity within the evangelical boundaries. The main points of the affirmation was, the Bible is not inerrant. The General Assembly has no power to dictate doctrine. The five fundamentals are unenforceable as a test to ordination. Liberty of thought and teaching and liberty of conscience were expected. The church needed to unify and no longer divide via modernists and fundamentalists. The modernists pushed through the affirmation of 1924, and with that the modernists called for unity. The fundamentalist camp saw that they had no further role in the faith and split off into the Orthodox Presbyterian Church. The Orthodox does not recognize the Auburn Affirmation. More so, in order to be ordained within the Orthodox Church, a commitment to the 5 fundamentals of faith are a requirement. The modern and largest membership body of the Presbyterian United States Church has continued to go down the path of social progressivism, even accepting homosexual marriage and clergy. The Confession of 1967 solidified the affirmation, and it is considered the final blow to any chance that the fundamentalists would ever try to reunite with the Church.